Welcome to the first multilingual clinical NLP workshop. This workshop is a virtual workshop which is being held related to the MIE 2020. First of all, to give you some overview on the topic of this workshop, clinical natural language processing and text mining tools have the aim to transform unstructured data, mainly textual data such as electronic health records or other kind of clinical related documents, into a sort of structured representation using a variety of natural language processing tools and tasks. For English, there has been a large a collection of resources being generated during the last years. Different kinds of documents are being processed. There are a large collection of terminologies, of processing and software components. They have been applied to a lot of different use cases and tasks. So why do you have such a large collection of resources for English? So basically, if you look at the driving forces behind clinical NLP, you can see that there are like four very essential aspects to be considered. One is access to data, access to what we call corpora, labeled, annotated textual data. Many of these have been produced actually in the context of shared tasks, which we will introduce later on. There are different kinds of resources which are like software and code, which is available to the community. Some of them are more like general machine learning frameworks and modules, which are being used to process clinical text. And some are even like specific platforms and components tuned to process the particularities of clinical textual data. Many of these resources are being used and are being developed in the context of shared task, a sort of competition or competitive environment where both academia and companies are trying to solve particular tasks posed by shared task organizers. Another aspect to take into account is access to data. So basically being able to have legal access to clinical records or clinical data. At the evaluation side, you can have evaluation both at the level of components, so how good tools are to solve a very particular task, for instance, clinical coding or labeling semantically mentions of particular entities in clinical text, such as diseases, or more like usability aspects, so basically to integrate these components into more complex workflows to solve certain end-user tasks. For doing this evaluation, you obviously need some sort of reference or gold standard or data set you use to benchmark. So high quality data collections, which are usually produced by humans, by domain experts, through a manual, very time-consuming labeling of data. And this labeled data collection is basically the reference or the data collection used to compare or to benchmark automatic machine learning clinical NLP systems. Obviously, for preparing this data, you have to consider several things. Manual data or benchmark data need to be consistent, need to be high quality. It has to be connected to some annotation interfaces. To label and prepare this data is very complex, so you need benchmark and annotation interfaces and tools, proper guidelines, and even to think about what is the ideal format to be able to consume these manual annotations. Shared tasks are being developed and held for clinical NLP since quite some time. So basically you prepare this gold standard data, you share it with the community. They have to predict automatically some labels, and then you benchmark and evaluate them against the gold standard, the manual one. To do benchmark, you need some sort of metrics or settings for benchmarking the quality. There are very classical metrics or scores which you can use for evaluating the system, such as precision, recall, F-score, but there are many other metrics as well to evaluate the quality. So shared tasks are really key as an instrument for independent quality evaluation of these components. To have a common data set is key for this. They produce some sort of de facto standards in terms of formats, which promotes interoperability and harmonization of resources. Many new resources are actually tools are being developed through these shared tasks. It improves the limitation to data access. So basically, the data access issue is being solved by the task organizers, not by the people developing the software. And it serves as a sort of knowledge transfer between academia and industry. So to use cutting-edge methodologies to solve problems which later on can be used in industry as well and for companies. This is the overview of the workshop. Basically, we will have a talk about a shared task we organized recently on clinical coding. Then we will have some flash talks by invited speakers, short talks. And in the end, we will have some sort of wrap up and open question session where the audience can ask the different speakers some questions related to their talks. And then we will have some closing remarks on basically next steps of what need to be done to actually promote the update of these shared tasks. Thank you very much.